Thomas Harris's Hannibal, the third novel in the Hannibal Lecter series, is a baroque and operatic exploration of revenge, identity, and the seductive nature of darkness. Set 7 years after the events of The Silence of the Lambs, the novel finds its principal characters, Clarice Starling and Dr. Hannibal Lecter, profoundly changed and isolated. The novel abandons the tight procedural thriller structure of its predecessor for a sprawling Gothic narrative that spans continents and delves into the most disturbing corners of the human psyche. It is a story not just about the hunt for a monster, but about the transformation of a hero and the consummation of a deeply unorthodox relationship. The world of Hannibal is one of moral and institutional decay. The FBI, once Clarice Starling's source of identity and purpose, has become a nest of political intrigue and misogyny, personified by her nemesis, the ambitious and corrupt Justice Department official Paul Krendler. Starling, once the Bureau's rising star, is now a pariah, her career stalled, and her reputation tarnished by a botched drug raid that the media and her internal enemies have twisted against her. She is hardened, cynical, and haunted by the silence from the one person who truly understood her, Dr. Lecter. Meanwhile, Dr. Lecter is living a life of cultivated freedom in Florence, Italy, under the alias of Dr. Fell, a respected academic curator. He indulges his sophisticated tastes in art, music, and cuisine, a predator hiding in plain sight amongst the cultural treasures of the Renaissance. Yet, he too is isolated, a man out of time, observing the world with a mixture of contempt and intellectual curiosity, his thoughts occasionally drifting to the FBI agent who captured his interest years ago. Part 1. The Catalyst of Vengeance, Mason Verger. The plot is set in motion by the novel's third major player, Mason Verger. The sole surviving victim of Hannibal Lecter's earlier attacks, Verger is a figure of grotesque horror. Immensely wealthy from his family's meatpacking empire, he is a quadriplegic, confined to a complex life support system, his face a horrifying ruin of scar tissue after he was induced by a drug-addled Lecter to peel it off and feed it to his dogs. Verger is consumed by a single, all-encompassing desire: to enact a slow, agonizing, and poetic revenge on Dr. Lecter. His plan is not merely to kill Lecter, but to subject him to a unique form of torment, to see him eaten alive by a specially bred herd of giant, savage wild boars. From his Maryland estate, Muskrat Farm, Verger uses his vast fortune to manipulate the world. He has placed a massive bounty on Lecter's head and uses his political influence to pull strings within the Justice Department. Understanding that traditional methods have failed to locate Lecter, Verger concocts a diabolical plan. He believes that the only person who can draw Lecter out of hiding is Clarice Starling. He orchestrates the public humiliation of Starling, ensuring she is reassigned to the moribund Lecter case. His calculation is simple and cruel. He will use her as bait. He anticipates that Lecter, with his unique and obsessive interest in Starling, will not be able to resist making contact, thus revealing his location. Starling, aware of her manipulated position but driven by her ingrained sense of duty, reluctantly accepts the assignment, reigniting a hunt that will define the rest of her life. Part 2. The Florentine Gambit, a dance of intellect and greed. The narrative shifts to Florence, where Lecter, as Dr. Fell, has positioned himself as a candidate to become the curator of the Palazzo Capponi. His life is one of quiet, intellectual superiority, but his presence begins to arouse the suspicion of Chief Inspector Rinaldo Pazzi, a respected Florentine detective with a noble lineage, but a soul tainted by avarice. Pazzi, initially investigating the disappearance of the previous curator, senses something amiss about the erudite Dr. Fell. Through methodical police work and a stroke of luck, accessing the FBI's most wanted database and recognizing Lecter from a security tape, Pazzi makes the stunning discovery of the fugitive's true identity. The immense bounty offered by Mason Verger proves too great a temptation for Pazzi to resist. He forgoes official channels, dreaming of a lavish retirement, and decides to capture Lecter himself. This section of the novel becomes a tense cat-and-mouse game, a contest of wits steeped in Florentine history. Pazzi, blinded by greed, severely underestimates his opponent. He hires Sardinian criminals to assist in the capture, planning to ambush Lecter at the Palazzo Vecchio. Harris masterfully builds the suspense, contrasting Pazzi's clumsy, greedy machinations with Lecter's elegant, almost prescient awareness of the plot against him. Lecter, having discovered Pazzi's treachery, turns the tables in a spectacularly gruesome climax. In a scene dripping with historical irony, Lecter confronts Pazzi, paralyzes him, and then disembowels him before hanging his body from the same balcony where one of Pazzi's own ancestors was hanged centuries before during the Pazzi conspiracy. The public execution is Lecter at his most theatrical and terrifying, a blend of erudition, cruelty, and brutal efficiency. He effortlessly dispatches Pazzi's hired accomplices and vanishes from Florence, leaving a trail of carnage and a clear message that he is not a prize to be easily claimed. Part 3. The Return and the Inevitable Convergence. With Lecter now back on American soil, the hunt intensifies. He is no longer a distant phantom, but a present and active threat. His focus is entirely on Clarice Starling. He begins a perverse courtship, sending her letters and clues, testing her intellect and subtly drawing her closer. He sees in her a reflection of himself, an outsider, betrayed by the systems she serves, and possessing a capacity for understanding the darkness that others shun. He doesn't want to kill her. He wants to connect with her, and perhaps to transform her. Starling, for her part, follows the trail with a mixture of professional dedication and a deeply personal, almost subconscious, pull towards Lecter. She deciphers his cryptic messages and begins to understand his movements, operating on an intuitive level that baffles her FBI colleagues. Her investigation leads her to a direct confrontation with Mason Verger's network. She realizes that Verger's hunt is not for justice but for private, monstrous sport, and her own moral code puts her in direct opposition to both her own superiors and Verger's powerful organization. The climax of the hunt occurs when Verger's heavily armed team, led by his brutish assistant Cordell, finally manages to corner and tranquilize Lecter. They transport him to Muskrat Farm to prepare him for his horrifying fate with the boars. Starling, defying direct orders from Krendler and the FBI, follows them. Driven by a complex mix of duty, a belief that even a monster like Lecter deserves lawful justice, and her undeniable connection to him, she infiltrates the estate alone, determined to intervene. Her arrival triggers a chaotic and violent showdown. Starling is wounded in a firefight with Verger's men. In a stunning reversal, Lecter, momentarily incapacitated, breaks free and, instead of escaping, carries the wounded Starling to safety. The hunter becomes the savior. He then turns his attention to Mason Verger. In a masterstroke of psychological manipulation rather than physical violence, Lecter convinces the long-abused Cordell that Verger has betrayed him. He talks Cordell into pushing Verger's complex gurney over a rail and into the pit below, where the billionaire is devoured by his own instruments of revenge, his eel-like hair catching on the fence in a final, grotesque image. Part 4. The Transformation. Dinner with the Devil. The final section of the novel is its most controversial and philosophically challenging, departing entirely from the conventions of the thriller genre and veering into the realm of psychological horror and dark romance. Lecter takes the unconscious and heavily medicated Starling not to a prison or a hospital, but to a secluded, elegant, rented house. There, he nurses her back to health while simultaneously subjecting her to an intense and unorthodox form of psychotherapy. Using a combination of psychotropic drugs, hypnosis, and his unparalleled insight into her mind, he systematically deconstructs her identity. He forces her to confront the traumas that have defined her, The death of her heroic father, the symbolic screaming of the lambs, and the constant betrayals and humiliations she has suffered at the hands of the patriarchal system she tried so hard to serve. Lecter's goal is not to break her, but to free her, to excise the parts of her that cause her pain and to awaken the darkness he believes lies dormant within her. He offers her an escape from her past by presenting his own twisted worldview as a form of liberation. The culmination of this transformation is the novel's infamous climax, a surreal and horrifying dinner party. The guest of honor is Paul Krendler, whom Lecter has abducted. In a scene of unparalleled grand guignol horror, Lecter performs a craniotomy on the drugged but conscious Krendler. While engaging him in conversation, Lecter sautés slices of Krendler's own prefrontal cortex and feeds them to him. Starling, dressed in an elegant evening gown and under Lecter's powerful influence, not only watches but participates in this grotesque ritual. This act symbolizes her final, irrevocable break from her former life and its moral constraints. She has not just been seduced by the monster, she has joined him at his table. In the novel's closing moments, the psychological seduction becomes physical. Starling offers her breast to Lecter, an act that signifies a final, complete surrender and union. The screaming of the lambs inside her head is finally silenced, not through justice, but through the acceptance of her own dark potential and her union with the ultimate predator.